with that, I can group those together in a permission set group. But let me show you something. Let me go to one of my profiles, accounts receivable. And if I zoom back out a tiny bit, we can see all of these different sections on the profile. So my main app section, all of these sections here, assigned apps, connected apps, object settings, that's a big one. And then I have lots of sections under system as well. So things like my login hours, my login IP ranges, my session settings. Maybe I want to set password policies more restrictive than our org's password policies. So I have all of these options under the system section. Let me next show you a permission set. And when we get to the permission set, you may be thinking, this looks a lot like the profile. I have my assigned apps, my assigned connected apps, my object settings. All of this app section that probably looks the same as the profile. But watch what happens when I scroll down to my system section. There are a lot more options on the profile than there are on this permission set. And those options that are missing from the permission set are things like your login hours, your login IP ranges, your session settings. And they're not available with a permission set because those are things that restrict access. And permission sets don't restrict access. They only grant additional functional access. So you can look at this, look at a permission set, look at a profile in your Trailhead Playground. Just kind of picture this as a good reminder of what permission sets do, is granting additional functional access. Now, we've seen a couple types of profiles in my demo, but remember that license that I select is going to control the available options for my profile. So if, for example, I give someone a chatter free license or a chatter external, which allows people outside of your org to join you in a private chatter group, if I choose one of these license options, I won't be able to get to my full list of standard or custom profiles, kind of like you saw me demo on that new user record I started to create. But if I give a Salesforce license, this does allow me to get to those standard and custom profiles. So what does this actually mean for users' access? Let's look at these options down here. For my chatter profiles, my chatter free, you see red X's across the whole line here. First question, can we edit the CRED? We saw this before. CRED stands for your object permissions. Create, read, edit, delete. Can we edit the CRED for chatter profiles? Well, actually, this question is irrelevant. Chatter profiles don't have access to any data. They don't have access to objects. They don't have access to records. So whether or not we can edit the CRED, that's not even a question we need to ask necessarily because they don't have access to objects to begin with. So the answer there is no. Can we delete it? This brings up a good tip to remember. If Salesforce has given you something out of the box, usually it has the word standard in front of it, a standard profile, a standard object, a standard field. If it has the word standard in front of it, which I know chatter profiles don't, but they are standard. If it has the word standard in front of it, it means Salesforce has given it to you out of the box. And it also means you are limited in what you can do with it. So for example, I cannot delete it if it's something that Salesforce gave me out of the box. And then last question, which I actually already addressed for this one, can they access data? The answer is no. This person in a chatter profile gets access to all things chatter, but they cannot access any data, no objects, no records within those objects. And if you're wondering, why would we even give this profile to someone? Well, you might have your own use cases, but my example I always share, also from my old company, is a friend of mine worked in corporate communications. And she reached out to me and she said, hey, every year when we do our benefits enrollment, there's always so much confusion. People maybe aren't getting their questions answered or they don't have the right information. And she said, I just want another method to communicate and collaborate with our salespeople. So I made her a chatter-free user. She didn't need access to data. She didn't need to track accounts or opportunities, but she was able to post announcements on Chatter. She was able to answer their questions, and she was able to access all things Chatter. So again, you might have different use cases in your org. I always think of my own colleague and how well that worked out for her. Then our last two options we see here, which we have to have a Salesforce license to get to, are standard profiles and our custom profiles. So standard profiles, again, ones that you get out of the box. I'm going to start on the right-hand side of the chart this time. Do they have access to data? They absolutely do. They can access objects. They can access records in those objects. Can this profile be deleted? Well, it has the word standard in front of it. So the answer is no, we cannot delete it. Then can we access or can we edit the cred? Here's what I want you to remember for standard profiles. Standard profiles do not allow me to edit any standard object permissions or standard system permissions. Really important to remember. Standard profile, I cannot edit any standard object permissions or standard system permissions. I will show you this in my org because, again, I think it helps to see that visual. So for my standard objects, nope, I cannot edit the object permissions. Last, and this one is easy, for my custom profiles, the answer is yes to all of this. If it has the word custom in front of it, it's something I created to meet a specific need at my company. And usually I can do pretty much whatever I want with it because it's something I created. I get more control over it. So yep, you can access those object permissions. I can delete them if they're no longer needed, and they still get access to data. So let's go into my org again, and let's go look at one of our standard profiles. On the left-hand side, clicking on Profiles. And I'm looking at a list of all of my profiles. Now you'll notice some of them have the option to delete, but those are the ones that have this custom checkbox checked. Some of these, like my standard user, some of these are standard profiles. I cannot delete them, nor can I edit the standard object permissions or standard system permissions. So again, let's say all of you are sales users, but I haven't created a custom sales user profile just yet. So I went ahead and assigned all of you to this standard user profile. And I want to remove your ability to delete accounts. So I'm going to go into my object settings. If we look here, you do have full cred, create, read, edit, delete on accounts. And I go in to edit these permissions. But look what happens. These are all grayed out because this is a standard profile. I don't have the ability to edit standard object permissions or standard system permissions. It is not possible. But look here, looks like someone else created a sales user profile. If I want to edit something on a sales user profile, I can go through the same click path here. And because this profile is custom, then I can edit your object permissions, your standard object permissions, your standard system permissions, I can edit those on a custom profile. So custom profile, if you have the ability to create it, it's recommended to do so because you get more control over it. Now, usually helpful to use one of those standard profiles as a starting point. You can clone that and then really customize it. But you can see here I get more control with a custom profile. So what I want you to take away here on the exam, the correct answer will never be to edit standard object permissions or standard system permissions for standard profiles because it is not possible. And again, you can try this in your own sandbox if you want to, but not possible to remove those permissions. Okay, our object permissions. We've seen these come up a couple times, but here's where we really get in and talk about them. Object permissions, this is what we talk about when we use cred. And it's in a different order here. It's read, create, edit, delete. but we can remember this with cred. Again, sorry, my handwriting is so poor here. There we go, cred. Read, create, edit, delete. These are really kind of a high level access to objects, access to categories. We're not talking about specific records within the object just yet. We will get to that here shortly. But we like to compare this to driver's license privileges. So if you were to look at my driver's license, I have a Class D driver's license, which means I can drive regular vehicles. I can't drive a motorcycle, can't drive a semi-truck, can't drive a bus, but I can drive regular vehicles. Now, I usually ask my students, does this mean, and you can answer where you are. I know you can't answer through Zoom, but you can answer this one. Does this mean that I could drive any regular car? And some students say, yeah, you can drive any regular car. And then my follow-up question is, well, would you give me the keys to your car? And at that point, some students say, sure, as long as you're insured. That's an important piece of it. But sometimes students kind of take a step back and say, well, wait a minute. Yeah, you have a driver's license, but I don't know if I want to share my car with you. I don't know if I want to hand over the keys. And that's kind of how your object permissions work. They work like your driver's license. They prove your ability. They don't guarantee your access to individual records. Unless, of course, I select these two bottom permissions, view all and modify all. If I give you these for a particular object, it's like I've given you a master key that works on all regular vehicles. View all and modify all, as the names imply. View all lets you see every single record within an object. Modify all allows you to edit, delete, transfer, and approve every single record of the object. And here's the unique thing to know about these, is that view all and modify all actually override other record access. So it doesn't matter what other record access you set up. That's the next piece that we'll get into. View all and modify all work as an override. So they're that magic master key. But in absence of these, if these are not checked, even having the full cred doesn't guarantee my access to individual records. So that's the first piece of this. We need this. That's access to the floor of the building, but it doesn't guarantee access to individual records unless you have view all and modify all. So let's talk about access to individual records first. Next is what I should say, but access to records that you own first. It is helpful to think of records in two distinct categories. There are records that users own and records that users don't own. Now, our wonderful Trailhead marketing team just recently put out a great article on how to remember things, how to remember some tips that we use, some of our instructors put together. And they're ones that we've had in our instructor community for a while. You'll see some of these with whom they're actually attributed to. So this one I did not come up with. I borrowed it from another instructor. But it is very helpful in remembering your ownership privileges. So this character here, his name is Phil, and Phil owns this account. And as the owner of an account record, as the owner of ABC Labs, he gets special ownership permissions. And we like to remember this with vested, so no second E. But that vested stands for view, edit,